In this next mini lesson, we're going to talk about the lasso and magnetic lasso tool. There are ways to make selections in Photoshop. There's a lot more than what I'm showing you here, but I think fundamentally and basically these are two really good tools to know. So this is in the document, lasso tool and magnetic lasso tool. So let me explain what they both do. They're located over here in our palette. Again, there are tools behind tools. So here we see the lasso tool. There's the polygon, the magnetic. Besides that, there's also, and again, these are all ways to make selections, rectangular marquee tool, elliptical, and so on. There's also the quick selection tool and magic wand tool. The quick selection tool helps us do things really fast, but I think basically we need to understand how these work first. So the way that I would approach this, our goal is to have two pictures. So you want to find two different pictures. One, find the picture of a picture of someone from head to toe and copy and paste that into Photoshop. Secondly, in another document, find a picture of a place because we're going to cut the person out and put them in the other picture. So if you need to hit pause and do that now. To make our selection, we're going to use the lasso tool and magnetic lasso tool. So to begin, I'm going to use the magnetic, and what it does is it finds contrast between pixels, so it kind of helps us make a selection. So if I click, and every once in a while I click, it adds what are called anchor points. Or if I just keep going, it kind of does a good job. It's not a great tool. It does need refinement when we're done, but it's a good starting place. So I'm just kind of going around our person. Before I get too far, if your image ends up looking like this, where it's just chaos, and you don't know what to do, you can always go to Edit, Toggle Last State, or Step Backward. And you can go back very, very far. So just continue to go back. Toggle Last State, keep going back. So let me try that again. So I'm going to just go around my subject as best I can. It doesn't have to be great. So we're going to come back in and refine it. And I want to find where I started and click to apply. And with the magnifying glass, if I zoom in, I can see my selection. And I can also use the hand tool to move around. So this is technically called marching ants. It's just the selection that we see. So I did what I could with the magnetic lasso tool. Now I want to switch to the lasso tool. And so what we're going to look at here is how to refine the selection. So with the lasso tool, if I hit the shift key, I'll see a plus sign. So I can add to a selection. Or if I hold the alt key, I'll see I get a minus sign. So I can take away from a selection. And it's important to pay attention right here. So what we're going to do is I want to take this part out of my selection. So I'm going to hold the Alt key and I'm going to trace this part by hand. It's all freestyle as best I can. And I want to completely come back to where I started to make sure I totally get that part out of my selection. Let me do it again over here. So this I want to add to my selection. So I'm going to hold the Shift key. I'm going to trace this really, really nicely. I'm not going to ride the line like this because watch what happens when I come back. It leaves little remnants, so I can undo that. So I'm going to hold the Shift key, and I'm going to trace this very, very carefully, come all the way back to where I started to make sure I completely get that in. And what I need to do is go around my selection, this whole guy, and add parts in and take parts away to our selection. So I'm holding the Shift key, and I'm completely tracing what I want. On his arm right here, I'm holding the Shift key, I'm tracing the edge. Maybe I'll just grab this real quick too. I'm going to come back to where I started to make sure I get that included in my selection. Now I'm just going to kind of do a quick run through right here. I'm holding the Alt key, come back to where I started. Alt key, tracing. Again, this is by hand. Shift key, I'm going to add. So this part I want out. I'm going to hold the Alt key. I'm going to trace what I want really, really nicely, and I'm going to completely circle the part I'm trying to omit to get rid of that. Again, you can always go to undo or toggle last state if something is messed up. So this part I want to take away, so I'm going to hold the Alt key and trace it really, really nicely. So we use lasso tools and selection tools quite a bit in Photoshop to make selections. A lot of times we want to pair this with another tool, which we'll cover in the future, or concept, which is called masking. What we're doing here is we're going to end up leaving part of our image behind, and that's not good form. This is more about you understanding how to use the lasso tools than anything else at this point. So we'll get to learn how to use layer masks, which are really important. So again, I'm just holding the Alt key, completely circling the part I don't want. Same here. Alt key, trace that by hand, come back to where I'm at. Hit the rest of the shoe. We'll pretend like that was really, really good. Let's grab his pants here real fast. So I'm holding the Shift key, completely coming back to where I started. Got part of the jersey there. And we'll say that's good enough. So that's how we lasso out elements. So using the Magnetic Lasso Tool and Lasso Tool. So now that I have him selected, I'm just going to go to Edit, Copy, and I'm going to come over to my other picture and go to Edit, Paste. And here he is, and he's really, really big. And I can move him with the Move tool. This is the layer I'm working on. So in order to get him to fit the scale, we're going to press Control T, just like we use to rotate things. So Control T will bring up a dialog again. But in this case, we want to scale him down. So I'm going to continue to grab this corner and just kind of keep making him smaller and smaller until he fits the size of my document, or the size that I want him to be. So we'll maybe say that that looks pretty good. Sure. And then double click to apply. So we want to keep things proportionate too. So don't skew him tall or wide. Keep things proportionate. That could be achieved by holding another key on accident when you're scaling things. You know, people don't look like this and they don't look like this. They should remain proportionate. So that's how you select something and copy and paste it to another document. Now you don't have to do this, but on the document that I provided for you guys, I teach you how to make a digital shadow if you want to. So I'll just do that real fast. You don't have to do this though. But you know, he doesn't really fit in the space because of the light. And there's a little bit of difference in quality between the pixelization in the background in this file as well. But the light is our biggest tell that it's not realistic. So what we would do is duplicate a layer. So with this layer selected, there's a little paragraph right here. I can click and I can duplicate this layer. And I'll say, okay, so now I have two of them. And then with the magic wand, what I would be doing if I turn these off is I'm going to select where he is not. So I've selected all of this stuff on this layer. And I would select the inverse. So now I just have him. And I can go to Edit, Fill. And I'm going to fill this with black because we're making a shadow. And these instructions again are right here, all the step by step. And I would go to Select, Deselect. And then we're going to blur it. So we're going to go to Filter, Blur, add a Gaussian blur because shadows are soft. They have a soft edge. So I don't really know what I'm looking for yet. So I'm going to turn this all back on. But I need to skew this. So again, I'm going to press Control T. I told you guys we'd use Control T a lot. But this time, just holding the Control key once I have it up, I'm going to grab the corners and skew the shadow to kind of match the background. It looks like the sun is coming from overhead, but see the sun's kind of actually coming out this way. So maybe we pull back the shadow this way. And maybe I rotate a little bit and get that into there. So we can keep working on this, but you get the idea. Also, his shadow's in front of him. That's not real. So I'm going to take this layer and drag it down. So now that it's under him. Also, it's too harsh. So I'm going to set the opacity right here of this layer to less. So we're just going to kind of bring that down. I'm going to Control T and skew it a little bit more just so it kind of pull it down a little bit more. And maybe it should just be a little bit darker. Bring that up. And I'm going to blur it one more time. Just filter, blur, Gaussian blur. So this tutorial is not about making shadows and stuff. It's just part of it, but it looks a little bit more realistic to have that there. So again, more just about the lasso tool. So we just covered the lasso tool, magnetic lasso tool, how to make selections, and I hope that was helpful.